Hey guys, tonight we slide behind the dusty curtain of a rickety Elizabethan playhouse, where the lights are just candles, the air smells like a mix of wax and sweat, and the lead actor is currently unconscious on a hay-stuffed pallet, still wearing his entire costume from Hamlet. Doublet, hose, feathered cap, yes, even the shoes. Tonight we are talking about why actors, those glittering stars of Shakespeare's London, quite literally slept in their costumes. It's not because they were quirky. It's not even just laziness, though let's be honest, if you'd just done 5 sword fights in a row under 3 layers of wool and 20 pounds of makeup, you wouldn't be rushing to undress either. No, it's deeper than that. It's the exhaustion, the culture, the superstition, the economics of a career that looked glamorous from the pit but felt a lot like rolling around backstage with a half-eaten onion pie and a borrowed wig. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and the local time in the comments. I love knowing where in the world my sleepy travelers are tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The boards creak beneath your feet as you trudge off stage. It's not a metaphor. They really do creak, probably termites, probably centuries old. Your doublet itches at the armpits, your collar is slick with dried sweat, and your calves are currently being suffocated by hose that haven't been properly stretched since the coronation of Queen Elizabeth I. You're exhausted. You've just played 2 different lords, a jester, and a dying uncle in 3 separate acts, on one of the busiest play nights of the week. You've ducked through trapdoors, shouted sonnets to half-drunken crowds, dodged a thrown tomato, and smiled through it all. And now? Now you need to collapse. But here's the catch. There's no dressing room. Not really. There's a cramped space behind the stage with a cracked mirror and a comb that hasn't seen soap in 5 years. There are trunks for wigs and masks, a few oil lamps, and somewhere, possibly under that hay bale, a very judgmental rat. You consider taking off your costume. Just for a moment. Just to breathe. But the energy leaves your limbs the moment you sit down. Your body goes slack. Your back hits straw. And before your fingers can even unlatch the first button, you're asleep. Still wearing the velvet tunic of Duke somebody or other. Still holding the plastic, well, wooden, sword from scene 4. Still smelling faintly of ale, stage dust, and regret. Mainstream historical fact? Many Elizabethan actors lived on site at their theatres or in boarding houses near the playhouses, often sleeping on or near the stage after a performance. Companies like the Lord Chamberlain's Men, Shakespeare's own troupe, operated on tight schedules and tighter quarters. With back-to-back rehearsals and little separation between home and work, actors often had no real place, or time, to strip down and get cozy. And let's be clear, cozy, in the Elizabethan theatre world meant not actively freezing. Most playhouses were open air, meaning if you stayed after dark, you were at the mercy of England's finest drizzle. So the actors adapted. They slept in what they wore. Not out of showmanship. Out of necessity. And perhaps, just a little, out of superstition. Fringe tidbit? Some actors believe that sleeping in costume preserved the character's spirit overnight. Kind of like theatrical method acting meets medieval bedtime rituals. Others thought removing the costume outside a performance space might curse the next show. Was it based on anything real? No. But neither is a skull talking back to Hamlet, and we let that slide. Historians still argue whether the tradition of actors sleeping in costume was formal practice or simple pragmatism. Some letters from the period describe bedfellows still girded for battle, referring to actors sharing straw pallets without disrobing. Others suggest it was more about guarding valuable clothing, many of which were owned by the company or rented, and thus had to be treated like a rented tuxedo during a hurricane. The wool scratches at your neck as you shift in your sleep. Somewhere nearby, someone coughs and mutters lines from Macbeth. It's not performance. It's practice. Tomorrow morning, the same actor will wake up, half satchel-faced, brush straw from his beard, and stumble directly into a scene rehearsal with his boots still laced. There's no separation between life and stage anymore. You don't just act. You live the play. And the costume? It's not just fabric. It's your second skin. Your uniform. Your armor. Your blanket. Tomorrow, the audience will cheer, hiss, weep. Tomorrow, someone might toss a coin. Or a cabbage. Tomorrow, you'll be on stage again. But tonight, you sleep, truly, deeply, fully, in the costume that makes you someone else. Because you don't get paid to pretend. You get paid to be. And being is exhausting. You wake up with a feather in your mouth. It's from the hat you wore as Sir Gallant whose name you forgot because the script changes every other week, and honestly, who has time to remember lines and characters and where the feather's supposed to go? Your back's stiff. There's a hay imprint on your cheek. Your hose have wrinkled around your thighs in a way that suggests they've given up, and your doublet smells suspiciously like the stagehand's lunch from yesterday. But here's the thing, you don't take it off. You stretch. Roll your shoulders. You even brush off a cobweb, and in doing so, smear some leftover blush across your sleeve. But you don't remove the costume. Why? Because it's not really yours. Mainstream historical fact: in Elizabethan England, stage costumes were some of the most valuable assets a theatre company owned, often more costly than the theatre itself. Rich, ornate garments weren't just for show, they were the closest an actor got to class mobility, at least in appearance. Nobility-inspired robes, embroidered tunics, and billowing cloaks were sometimes gifted from aristocratic patrons or scavenged second-hand from real noble wardrobes after a death in the family. Yes, you could be literally wearing a dead man's doublet. And these outfits weren't just worn during performances. They were guarded. Slept in. Hugged, practically. You glance around the dim backstage space. The velvet curtain hasn't been drawn yet, the morning sun barely filtering through the slats in the theatre's roof. But already, you see your castmates stirring in their spots, still clad in glittering, dusty, damp attire. One snores in a skirt large enough to hide a small farm animal. Another mumbles lines from Titus Andronicus in their sleep, dagger still in hand. Everyone is still dressed. And it's not a fashion statement. It's survival. Fringe tidbit? There were no closets. No wardrobes in the modern sense. Costumes were kept in locked trunks, often under the control of a company-appointed tieman or keeper of the wardrobe. These individuals were known to be protective, even territorial, about the gear. Woe unto the actor who lost or damaged a piece. Some keepers charged fines or withheld pay. There are even stories of actors sleeping in costume just to avoid handing them back at all. You shiver slightly, pulling your cloak tighter around you. It doesn't help much. Elizabethan cloaks look warmer than they are. But at least it's there. You'd rather shiver in silk than huddle in your undergarments. which, by the way, are a topic all their own. Historians still argue whether actors wore much of anything under their costumes at all. Some scholars suggest minimal layering, simple linen shifts or breeches, while others argue for full padding and multiple wraps, especially in winter. One surviving diary mentions an actor forgetting his leg garters and improvising with rope, leading to troublesome lumps mid-soliloquy. So really, sleeping in costume? It might have been the only barrier between you and the cold wooden planks of reality. You stand, half-laced and vaguely conscious, and make your way to the stage for warm-ups. Your boots thud softly. Your cloak billows. You're not fully awake yet. But you look like someone important. And that counts for something. Because these costumes, gaudy, worn, sweat-soaked, are a kind of magic. A transformation. And even in sleep, that magic doesn't quite leave you. You run lines while chewing dried apple slices from last night's stash. Every so often, a stagehand passes by, squinting at your sleeve like he's wondering if that embroidery is real silver. It is. Sort of. You don't correct him. The other actors emerge in clumps, yawning, stretching, and still cloaked in their roles. One is missing a cuff. Another's tights have started to peel at the knees. But nobody dares strip. Not until the wardrobe keeper unlocks the trunk. And even then, some don't bother. It's safer this way. Cheaper, too. You walk past a mirror, cracked at the top left. Your face is smudged, your collar twisted. But in the eyes staring back, you still look like someone who belongs on stage. And maybe that's the real reason. Not superstition. Not ownership. Just identity. When the applause fades and the candle wax cools and the audience goes home, who are you without the costume? So you sleep in it. You live in it. You dream in it. And when the horn blows and the curtains lift, you're already dressed. Already ready. Because when the costume's worth more than you, you treat it like it is you. You're halfway through a stale biscuit and reciting your first 3 lines for the day. Yes, again. When someone sneezes behind a curtain and a button rolls past your feet like it's trying to escape the production entirely. You don't flinch. That happens all the time. Buttons, seams, corset hooks, none of these things were built for the kind of repetitive chaos that is daily theatre life. Especially not in this century. They unravel, snap, tear, or go on holiday at the worst possible moment. And today? You're performing twice. So no, you're not taking this costume off. Not even for a nap. Mainstream historical fact: Elizabethan theatre companies often performed several different plays in the same week, sometimes even in the same day. These were rotating repertories, meaning actors had to memorize multiple roles at once, switching costumes and characters as fast as the stagehands could reset the props. Quick changes weren't just common, they were essential. And with only a handful of garments in rotation, actors would sometimes perform, rehearse, and even eat in the same outfit. You take another bite of your biscuit, which tastes like guilt and flour. You think about changing, just for the sake of freshness. But no. Because here's the reality: there is no laundry. There's a bucket. There's a bar of lye soap that someone swears has cleaned both laundry and livestock. And there's a rinse tub that smells like someone tried to baptize a dead hedgehog. Fringe tidbit? Costumes were rarely washed. Washing meant wear and tear, fading dyes, and shrinking fabric, none of which anyone wanted for garments that cost more than a year's rent. Instead, clothes were aired out, spot cleaned, and spritzed with herbal infusions meant to mask odors. One popular mixture was vinegar, rose water, and crushed bay leaves. Another was just rose petals and wishful thinking. So yeah, you don't take the costume off. You wear it to lunch. You wear it during your afternoon nap behind the curtain. You wear it while helping the carpenter move props for Act 3. And when it's showtime, you're already halfway ready. A few adjustments to the sleeves, a powdering of the cheeks, with flour, let's be honest, and you're back on stage. Ready to shout sonnets to a restless crowd who may or may not include a man selling pickled eels from a basket. You dodge the fishmonger's holler in scene 2 and make your exit without missing a cue. But back behind the curtain, things get complicated. Someone's hose are gone. Not missing. Gone. As in stolen? Misplaced? Eaten by raccoons? No one knows. But the actor is now pacing in an undershift and cursing the wardrobe gods, while the rest of you do the very grown-up thing of silently nodding and offering him a wig as a leg cover. Historians still argue whether quick change rooms even existed in smaller Elizabethan theatres. Larger venues like the Globe may have had small backstage, tiring rooms, from the word attire, but many troupes performed in temporary stages or in courtyards with no separation between performance and prep. This meant actors had to be semi-dressed at all times, or risk missing their entrance. It's no wonder the phrase, "the show must go on," stuck around. You tug at your collar and sit on a prop barrel. The velvet scratches a little, but you don't mind. The costume's broken in now. It fits better. Feels like yours, even if it technically isn't. And truth be told, removing it would just mean struggling to get it back on later. The laces on the back of your jerkin alone require a second pair of hands, and the last time you asked for help, the stagehand tied you into a knot that made you miss your cue. You doze a little in the wings. There's a lull between shows. Someone brings you a piece of cheese wrapped in paper. You eat it silently, thinking not about your lines, but about how many people have worn the same cloak before you. You wonder if they slept in it, too. Probably. The seams are soft at the elbows. The buttons loose from years of fingers fumbling in the dark. It's not just cloth. It's tradition. It's memory. It's the only thing between you and freezing to death during a December matinee where half the audience is shivering and the wind howls louder than your closing monologue. So you pull the hood over your head and lie down on a bench. Still dressed. Still in character, sort of. Because laundry is rare. Spare costumes are rarer. And time? Time is the rarest thing of all. You dream of cleaner boots and quieter dressing rooms. But when you wake up, 10 minutes before curtain call, you're ready. Because you never took it off. You're half asleep, balancing a wooden cup of lukewarm ale in one hand and your pride in the other, when someone flops down beside you on the straw. He's wearing your cloak. You blink. Slowly. Twice. He smiles, sheepishly. Borrowed it for rehearsal. You weren't using it. You gesture at your half-buttoned jerkin. Because I was sleeping. He shrugs and takes a sip from his own cup. Well, then you clearly didn't need it. You stare at him. He stares at the ceiling. The silence is broken only by the distant sound of someone belting a madrigal 3 keys too high. You sigh. Because this is just how it works here. Mainstream historical fact: in Elizabethan acting troupes, costumes were often communal property. Very few performers had their own personal wardrobe pieces. Instead, the company maintained a collection that was assigned, shared, and reshuffled depending on who played what and when. Roles rotated frequently, especially in smaller companies, which meant you might wear a noble's robe one day and pass it to your roommate the next. So yeah, that cloak? Not yours. Never was. Neither was the hat currently hanging on a nail beside the door, even though your name is stitched inside the brim, well, scratched, really, with a bit of burnt charcoal and a prayer. It doesn't matter. Ownership is fluid. You look around the cramped lodging space where 6 actors share 4 bedrolls, 2 barrels, and a pile of slightly suspicious hay. 3 of you are asleep. 2 are rehearsing. 1 is eating cheese from a pouch that may also contain a missing sock. Fringe tidbit? Some theatre companies used simple markings, like colored stitches or sewn-in tokens, to denote who got which piece of costume for a specific role. Others relied on first come, first dressed. There's at least one surviving letter from an actor complaining that his assigned rough was taken by that fool Garrick who plays drunk even when not acting and leaves sweat rings upon all collars. You lie back, letting the tension drain from your shoulders. It's too late to fight for the cloak now. He's curled up with it, muttering lines in his sleep and drooling down the fur trim. So you pull your sleeves over your hands and tuck your knees up. You're still in full costume, minus the cloak, and yes, it's itchy, and yes, the collar keeps folding in like a collapsing stage set. But at least you're not naked. Not like young Kit last week, who woke up late and had to sprint on stage half-dressed, improvising his first act as a recently robbed nobleman. Historians still argue whether Elizabethan actors rotated costumes primarily out of financial necessity or logistical ease. With few surviving wardrobe inventories, it's difficult to tell whether companies held a few dozen versatile garments or many specialized ones. What's certain is that actors often didn't know what they'd be wearing until the day of the show, and slept in costume to avoid surprises, theft, or misassignment. And that theft part? Very real. One time, the red satin overrobe for Henry IV went missing for 2 full days before turning up at a local pawnshop. The robe had been worn by no fewer than 7 different actors in 10 days. One of them finally cracked under financial pressure and traded it for 3 loaves of bread, a smoked herring, and something called a cold pudding of suspect texture. So yeah, sleeping in costume? It's less about rest and more about defense. You drift off to the creaking rhythm of someone pacing above, probably the prop master counting swords again. In your dreams, you're walking through a costume warehouse the size of a castle. Every piece is clean, labeled, and smells like lavender. No one steals your cloak. No one borrows your boots. No one sweats in your collar. But then the dream tilts sideways, and you're suddenly back in the cramped, hay-strewn corner of your shared stage house. Someone's foot ends up in your ribs. You don't complain. Because tomorrow, you might need his jerkin when yours gets stolen by the new guy. It's a circle of trust, irritation, and sweat. And in this world, you don't own your role. You just wear it until someone else does. So you roll over, doublet creaking slightly, and mutter your lines in your sleep, just in case someone forgets theirs tomorrow. You scratch your shoulder for the 12th time today, and let's be real, it's not because of stage fright or actors' nerves. It's because your costume is conspiring against you. The lining's stiff. The collar's stiff. The sleeves feel like they were sewn from porcupines who had strong opinions about elbow mobility. You shift your weight on the edge of a broken bench and try not to make it creak too loud. Next to you, another actor, still dressed in his queenly gown from yesterday's matinee, lets out a quiet groan and mutters something about lace being a medieval punishment. Mainstream historical fact: Elizabethan stage costumes were elaborate, multi-layered, and rarely practical. Actors wore stiffened doublets, padded hose, ornate gowns with fardingales, and elaborate collars, called ruffs, that required starching and careful storage. These garments were meant to impress an audience from a distance, not to be lived in. And yet, actors lived in them. 4 hours. 4 days. And yes, for sleep. You pick at the seam under your arm, which has started to chafe from yesterday's sword fight. Someone, probably Thomas, swapped your undershirt for one that smells like rosemary and regret. You make a mental note to add launder in dreams only to your growing list of Elizabethan grievances. Fringe tidbit? Some costume elements were stuffed with unexpected materials to create certain shapes. Fardingales, for instance, used reeds or whalebone to flare out skirts. Doublets might be padded with wool, horsehair, or even dried moss to enhance a performer's frame. These materials weren't breathable, washable, or remotely forgiving, which meant actors often ended their nights hot, itchy, and haunted by the memory of a particularly pokey chest panel. You stretch, trying to ease the itch along your back, and realize your neck is stuck to your collar with a dried mixture of stage glue and yesterday's highlight powder. At least no one's watching. Except the rat in the corner. Probably a critic. Someone tosses a line from the Merchant of Venice across the room and hits the wall with a wet thunk. It was supposed to be a tomato, but it missed by a century and landed as an onion. You don't flinch. You've built up a resistance to bad aim and worse produce. Historians still argue whether Elizabethan actors had designated sleeping attire or just rotated costumes as needed. Some documents from the time mention actors wrapping in robes, while others suggest they simply never removed certain garments between shows. One letter even implies an actor's costume rotted off in service of the role, a line that's either metaphorical or deeply upsetting. You adjust the belt on your doublet, which cuts across your ribs like a well-intentioned corset. Someone once claimed it was tailored for a nobleman with an alarming affection for chest tightness. Now it's yours. Kind of. Until it gets reassigned. You consider sneaking a spare shirt from the costume chest, but that would require opening the chest. And opening the chest would mean waking the wardrobe keeper. And no one wakes the wardrobe keeper. Not after last time. Let's just say someone tried it once. That someone now speaks exclusively in Shakespearean insults and has been assigned only minor tree roles ever since. So you lean back against the wall and press your shoulder into the cool brick, soothing the itch through sheer willpower. Around you, the others are shifting, snoring, rehearsing in their sleep. One actor is still in full armor, save for the missing greave he's using as a pillow. You're still in costume. Because comfort is a lie. Because you can't trust the chest. Because removing even one layer means you'll have to wrestle it back on tomorrow, and that's a battle you'd rather avoid. You close your eyes, let your thoughts drift, and try to ignore the growing itch at your thigh. It's probably just the wool. Or a flea. Either way, tomorrow you'll be back on stage. Still itchy. Still dressed. Still pretending this was a normal lifestyle. Because when you choose the actor's life, you don't choose silk sheets and bubble baths. You choose 2 hours of sleep in a tunic stitched with someone else's initials. You choose itches you can't reach. And you choose it gladly. Well, mostly. You open one eye to the sound of keys jingling, not the cheery kind, but the ominous clink that says, "I have the power to make your life very difficult." It's the wardrobe keeper. You sit up straight. Fast. Because when Mistress Brackley walks through the door, even the snoring stops. She's not loud. She's not cruel. She's just omnipresent. Sharp-eyed. Moves like smoke and knows the exact number of buttons on every costume in her care. You once saw her mend a rip mid-performance with one hand while sipping ale with the other. Mainstream historical fact: Elizabethan theatre companies employed wardrobe keepers, or tiremen for men and tirewomen for female costuming tasks, who managed, repaired, and guarded the troops' limited costumes. These individuals had immense authority, particularly because replacing costumes was wildly expensive. They often held literal keys to the costume trunks, and actors depended on their favor to access, retain, or swap pieces. Mistress Brackley sweeps in like a storm that's decided to be polite, for now. She surveys the room. Her gaze lands on you and lingers, just long enough for your collar to rearrange itself out of fear. You've slept in that again. You nod. Cautiously. Just preserving the integrity of the stitching, mistress. She snorts. It's not a laugh. It's a weather forecast. She continues her inspection. Next to you, another actor hastily buttons a jerkin he clearly wasn't wearing a minute ago. Mistress Brackley notices. Of course she does. She walks past, lets the silence drag, then mutters, "One more rip and you'll be in burlap for a fortnight." He nods like he's just been handed a royal pardon. Fringe tidbit? Some keepers would punish careless actors by assigning them the worst pieces in the wardrobe: threadbare cloaks, mismatched hose, or hats that smelled suspiciously like damp bread. The punishment wasn't physical. It was aesthetic. And in a business where appearance meant everything, it cut deep. You stand, stretch, and prepare for the brief ritual of inspection. Mistress Brackley checks hems, tugs sleeves, adjusts belts. It's not intimate, it's tactical. She's protecting her hoard. You could hide gold coins in these clothes and she'd still spot the missing seam. And she's not just guarding fabric. She's guarding the company's reputation. Historians still argue whether these wardrobe keepers operated independently or under the direct command of the theatre manager. Some accounts suggest they acted like costumed sergeants, running the backstage like a military barracks, issuing garments and fines with equal precision. Others believe they were glorified laundresses with too much thread and not enough pay. But every actor agrees, cross them at your peril. You pass inspection today. Barely. A few threads on your sleeve are fraying, and your left boot sole is separating like a bored marriage. But it holds. For now. Mistress Brackley snaps the trunk shut and locks it with a key the size of your hand. You exhale. And just like that, the window closes. No costume access until tomorrow. Which means if you take this one off now, you'll be performing in your undergarments, or possibly a curtain. So you don't. You smooth down the wrinkled front of your doublet and start warming up your voice. Someone coughs. Someone else hums. The wardrobe keeper vanishes behind the curtain, and you swear the room breathes a little easier. Because nothing makes you more religious than realizing your collar is sewn shut and the person with the scissors just left the building. You pace the floor, testing your lines, feeling the itch of wool across your back. But you don't mind. Not much. Because this costume? This scratchy, stiff, absolutely irreplaceable costume? It's your ticket to the stage. To the part. To the applause. And the person who holds the key to that? You call her mistress, and you never, ever, wake her early. Midnight again. The candles have long sputtered out, and the theater is cloaked in that peculiar darkness that smells like damp wood, cold wax, and yesterday's applause. You're lying on a pallet barely wide enough for your spine, arms crossed over your chest like a very dramatic corpse, still dressed as a 12th century courtier. Brocade, gold piping, knee-high boots with one loose heel. You haven't so much as unbuckled a belt. Because tonight, like most nights, there's no such thing as off-duty. Not when you're sleeping under a roof that leaks both rainwater and thievery. Mainstream historical fact: theft was a serious concern in Elizabethan theaters. Costumes were not only expensive but also extremely attractive on the black market. Some were made from genuine noble garments, inherited or purchased second-hand from estates, and could fetch a high price in pawnshops or resale. There are multiple recorded cases of stolen costumes leading to fights, arrests, and public accusations, even among fellow actors. You pull your cloak tighter. It's not just warmth you're after. It's camouflage. Because if someone sneaks in tonight looking to lift a ruff or a ringed belt, they might just move on if it's still attached to a living, possibly snoring, actor. This is survival theater. And you've learned that the best alarm system is a twitchy sleeper with a dagger tucked into his sleeve. Fringe tidbit? In some companies, it was common practice to keep a dagger or cudgel nearby, not for stage combat, but for post-curtain deterrence. There are even tales of actors sleeping with one eye open, especially when traveling through unfamiliar towns. One infamous account speaks of a band of actors ambushed at an inn, where 3 costumes and a horse disappeared overnight. The actors were reportedly found yelling Shakespearean insults at the moon by morning. You shift under your cloak, one boot still laced and half your hose bunched at the knee. Your costume's not comfortable, but it's secure. The doublet creaks when you breathe, and your collar is lightly glued to your neck with dried sweat, but at least no one's stealing it off your body. Outside, the wind picks up. A creak. A footstep? No, just the wooden frame of the building settling, or possibly someone relieving themselves into a bucket behind the props curtain. You try not to think about it. Historians still argue whether actors in this era faced organized crime threats or just opportunistic thieves. Some believe stage troops were soft targets, traveling with fine clothes and coin but no armed guards. Others argue that their unpredictable schedules and chaotic reputations made them too volatile to be worth robbing. Either way, theft from within, the desperate actor who pawned a crown or swapped a cloak for food, was often a more immediate concern. You curl tighter into yourself. You don't mistrust your company. Not exactly. But you don't not trust them, either. Especially not when someone's been eyeing your jeweled cufflinks with a little too much nostalgia lately. You close your eyes. You don't dream of the stage tonight. You dream of locks. Of chests that don't creak when opened. Of waking up and finding everything still in place. The wig, the boots, even that ridiculous belt buckle that has jabbed you in the ribs every night this week. The worst part? You've started to find comfort in the stiffness. The pressure. The smell of wool and rosewater vinegar. Because it's familiar. Because it's yours, or close enough. And in a world where actors share roles, lines, lodgings, and sometimes sandwiches, Having something that feels like it belongs to you is worth sleeping in. Even if it itches. Even if it pinches. Even if you have to stay half awake all night just to keep it. Because if you wake up in the morning still in costume, still whole, still ready to walk on stage, you've won. For now. The rooster crows just as the morning bell from St. Olave's tolls in the fog, and your first thought isn't breakfast or blessed silence, it's where's my ruff? You jolt upright, a tangle of limbs and linen, and pat your collar like it's the wallet you fear you've left in a tavern. Relief floods your chest as your fingers graze the stiff, pleated edge of your costume's most absurd ornament. Still there. Crushed a bit on the left side. But attached. You breathe again. Not because it's a particularly flattering ruff. It's not. It makes your head look like it's being served on a platter. But because losing it would have meant invoking the wrath of Mistress Brackley and, frankly, that's worse than any plague. Mainstream historical fact. In Elizabethan theatre culture, actors weren't just performers. They were public figures. The line between stage and street was often blurred, especially in London, where actors could be recognized in character even off stage. This led to a curious phenomenon. Some actors, especially those in popular or iconic roles, were expected, or encouraged, to remain in costume when mingling with the public. It was part marketing, part superstition, and all performance. You rise, careful not to dislodge your cloak, and peer around the half-lit sleeping area. Others are stirring too, one still half asleep and reciting lines from Othello, another scratching at a flea bite through layers of velvet. A few are still in costume. Not just out of laziness now, but on purpose. Because when you play a queen, or a villain, or a fool that makes people weep, there's a strange kind of power in staying dressed a little longer. Letting the magic linger. Fringe tidbit? Some actors believe their costumes held the spirit of the character. Removing them too quickly was thought to confuse the soul, inviting bad luck or even the ill speech of ghosts, as one superstitious actor wrote. It wasn't uncommon to see performers bowing to their costume chests, whispering thanks, or even asking forgiveness when changing clothes. You wander toward the edge of the stage, stepping over discarded props and a wig that looks like it's plotting something. Outside, the streets of London murmur to life. Vendors calling. Hooves clopping. The sharp tang of the Thames wafting through narrow alleyways. You pull your cloak tighter, not because it's cold, but because you can feel them watching. The public. The early risers who wait by the playhouse gates to glimpse the actors they saw last night. And if they catch you in costume, even just the cuffs, even just the hat, it sparks something. Recognition. Excitement. A bit of magic. Historians still argue whether this actor-in-costume public presence was encouraged by theatre managers or merely a byproduct of fame. Some believe actors were strategically paraded through town in costume to drum up anticipation. Others suggest it was self-motivated, a way to extend applause beyond the curtain and milk public affection a little longer. You step into the alley to relieve yourself and nearly trip over a pile of playbills. Your face is on one. Not the best likeness, more smudge than smile, but still. That's you. And as you walk back in full costume, a baker's boy passes and stares. "Are you Prince Eric?" he asks, breathless. You pause. The instinct is to say no. To mutter something about stage names and pretend humility. But you nod. Solemn. With a little flourish of your cloak that's 90% habit, 10% flair. The boy beams and runs off, presumably to reenact Act 3 with a loaf of bread as your co-star. You go back inside, your boots scuffing along the boards that have held your weight more times than you can count. And in that moment, the itchiness fades. The stiffness softens. Because the costume isn't just fabric anymore. It's memory. Reputation. Legend, if you squint hard enough. So you leave it on a little longer. Not because you have to. Because you want to. Because for a few more minutes, you're not just some exhausted, underpaid actor sharing a flea-ridden cot. You're Prince Eric. Or Lord Falconer. Or the fool who spoke the truth. And they remember you. You sleep in your costume again that night. Not just out of necessity, but because when the curtain never truly falls, neither does the roll. You roll over and nearly crush your own bust line. Which wouldn't be a problem, except tonight, you're Lady Beatrice of Verona, and this corset has opinions. You groan softly. The bodice is digging into your ribs like it's trying to climb inside and live there. The petticoats are tangled around your legs in a determined attempt to become a second spine. And don't even ask where the wig went. Somewhere between curtain call and collapsing onto the straw pile, it abandoned ship. Because tonight, you played a woman. And you did it in the kind of costume that demands three things: poise, stamina, and complete surrender of personal comfort. Mainstream historical fact: in the Elizabethan period, women were not allowed to act on public stages. As a result, all female roles were performed by men and boys, typically young apprentices whose voices hadn't yet deepened and whose jawlines could still pass as maidenly. These actors, often called boy players, were required to don layers of female costume: corsets, gowns, wigs, makeup. It was an art form built on illusion, and quite a bit of discomfort. You lie back and stare at the cracked rafters above, breathing shallowly because your corset won't let you expand your lungs past quiet panic. Someone snores nearby in a king's robe. Another has a foot sticking out from under a makeshift sheet of velvet stage drapery. You shift, trying to unknot the petticoat from your knees. It resists. It's basically become sentient. Fringe tidbit? Some corsets used on stage were actual repurposed undergarments from noble households. Tight, whaleboned constructions not meant for sudden exits, fight scenes, or sleeping on hay. Actors would pad their hips and chests with rolls of linen, moss, or even straw to create convincing silhouettes. Imagine trying to lie down in that. Now imagine doing it every night. You reach under the gown and try to adjust the stuffing, wincing as a pin jabs your thigh. You've named it Sir Pointy, and it stabbed you in every performance since Michaelmas. The curtain behind you rustles. It's Kit, the younger apprentice, still in his Juliet gown from the matinee. His wig is half off, his cheeks are smeared with rouge, and he's chewing bread like it personally offended him. "You slept in yours too?" he asks, crumbs tumbling. You nod. He raises his arm and gestures to his sleeve, already stained with what might be blackberry juice, stage blood, or an unfortunate accident involving both. "No choice," he mutters. "Mistress Brackley said if I wrinkled another bodice, I'd be playing shrubbery until Easter." Historians still argue whether these young actors were trained specifically in female gestures, speech patterns, and mannerisms. Some surviving manuals mention graceful bearing and voice-lifting techniques, while others suggest the audience simply accepted the illusion without much question. Regardless, these performers were expected to carry out demanding roles while encased in clothing that restricted movement, breath, and dignity. You twist onto your side, carefully adjusting your skirts to avoid another pin ambush. Your ribs ache. Your ankles are bound by ribbons that someone tied too tightly, probably in the middle of Act 2 when the quick change nearly went sideways. But you leave it all on. Because taking it off? Too risky. The gown might tear. The petticoats might get crushed. The corset might never go back on properly without the help of 3 other actors and a wooden spoon. And besides, you're playing Lady Beatrice again tomorrow. Same gown. Same bodice. Same bouquet of fabric-based grievances. Removing it now would only delay the suffering. You close your eyes and try to find a comfortable position. There isn't one. But you're used to that. You've learned how to fall asleep without fully exhaling, how to prop your legs so the petticoats don't strangle you in your sleep, and how to whisper your lines between the breathing spaces your corset allows. It's an art form. Or maybe just a form of sleep-deprived surrender. Either way, it's yours. And when morning comes, you'll already be dressed. Already be her. Lady Beatrice of Verona. The woman you become through pinched toes, tight laces, and a very specific awareness that you're drilling slightly onto a satin sleeve worth more than your last 3 meals. You wake with a start and a cramp in your calf, your leg frozen midpoint like you're still curtsying in your dreams. You groan, trying to shake off the ghost of yesterday's performance, only to remember, you're still in your doublet and hose. And your left boot is somehow tighter than it was last night, which feels suspiciously like vengeance from the wardrobe gods. You don't have time to contemplate divine retribution through leather, though. Because today is payday. Sort of. More like pay-hope. Mainstream historical fact, Elizabethan actors were often paid in irregular spurts, based on company profits, performance attendance, and managerial whim. Many were shareholders in the acting company itself, which meant a share of the revenue, but also a share of the debts. If an actor damaged a costume, their pay could be docked. If they lost one, that might mean being benched from performances, or worse, held responsible for the full value of the item. You sit up, every muscle protesting like a Greek chorus of discomfort. You reach for your belt pouch and realize it's thinner than it should be. You glance down. The ornate buckle on your borrowed sash. Gone. You scan the room, heart sinking. You'd bet a stale pie in your next soliloquy it was borrowed by one of the junior actors, probably Robbie, whose idea of conflict resolution is passive-aggressive harp strumming. You rise, brushing off hay and regret. Your costume clings to you with the stubbornness of debt. Because you can't afford to replace anything. Not with what they pay you. Fringe tidbit? Some actors took to sleeping in their costumes simply to avoid damage or loss that might reduce their already meager earnings. In some companies, actors could be fined for every torn seam, missing accessory, or stain deemed unworthy of noble presentation. The idea of removing a doublet and discovering it had mysteriously unraveled overnight was simply too risky. You limp your way across the room to find your cloak. Still there. Folded. Well, crumpled. But intact. That's something. You pass Kit, who's still in his Juliet gown, muttering lines in his sleep while clutching a pearl necklace like a lifeline. You admire the commitment. You reach the common hall where the theater manager is handing out coins with the enthusiasm of a man giving away his last teeth. You wait your turn. When your name is called, you step forward, trying to smooth your sleeves into something less crumpled messenger pigeon and more humble professional. He eyes you. Still in costume? He asks, raising a brow. You nod. I live in her now. He snorts and drops 3 small coins into your palm. It's barely enough for a meal, but it's better than the ominous nothing you received last month when someone confused your King Lear with drunken peasant number 4. Historians still argue whether costuming penalties were strictly enforced or more often used as threats to keep actors in line. Surviving ledgers show a baffling mix of deductions: for lost cuff, torn hose from fall, mud upon hen, and one delightful entry simply marked perfume abuse. It's unclear whether these were meant to maintain theatrical standards or just creative excuses to shortchange talent. You step back, fingers curled tight around the coins. You've made it another week. Just barely. You return to your corner of the sleeping chamber and sit back down on your pallet. You could undress. Just to air out the shirt. Loosen the hose. Maybe untangle that third petticoat that keeps trying to become a scarf. But you don't. Because tomorrow is a double show. And you can't risk a missing cufflink, or a swapped out sash, or waking up to discover that your entire costume has been repurposed for a tree sprite in a Midsummer Night's Fever dream. You lie back down. Your doublet squeaks. You don't care. You fall asleep dreaming of coin purses that don't jingle sadly, and costumes that don't cost more than your dignity. Because here, in the world of wigs, wine, and wildly variable wages, the costume stays on. You're halfway through a dream where you're finally performing Hamlet, on an actual royal stage, mind you, with applause echoing like thunder, when someone shakes your shoulder and whispers, "It's raining." And the roof's leaking again. You open your eyes to find a droplet hitting your cheek like nature's passive-aggressive stage direction. You shift to your side, dragging your cloak over your head, and there it is, the cold, wet truth of Elizabethan life. Your costume's getting soaked. Mainstream historical fact: most playhouses in Elizabethan London were partially open air. The famed Globe Theatre, for instance, had a circular design with an exposed center, leaving both performers and audience at the mercy of the weather. Rain didn't necessarily cancel performances unless it flooded the stage, or the audience started drowning. You sit up, groggy and soggy, and feel the distinct squelch of damp wool clinging to your arms. Your sleeves have absorbed more water than a dried sponge at sea. Someone to your right sneezes dramatically and moans, "My ruff is wilting." You don't laugh. Because yours is wilting too. Fringe tidbit? Some Elizabethan actors attempted to weatherproof their outfits with a mix of wax and oil rubbed into the fabric. While this did provide some resistance, it also turned their clothes into walking fire hazards. One company reportedly banned oil-treated cloaks after a candle incident resulted in an actor briefly becoming a human torch mid-soliloquy. You peel yourself off the pallet, trying to preserve the back of your jerkin from full saturation. Too late. The collar is already soggy and drooping like a disappointed parent. You hear someone mutter, "Why does the rain smell like cabbage?" You don't want to know. Historians still argue whether actors had designated dry storage for their costumes, especially in traveling companies. Some documents mention the wardrobe house, which might have doubled as a general supply area. But in many instances, costumes lived where the actors did, meaning they were just as exposed to the weather, rodents, and spills as their owners. You step onto the creaky floorboards of the main room, where puddles are forming in dramatic places, directly under the prop table, next to the script copies, and, of course, right where your boots are. You fish them out. They squelch. There goes your heroic stride for the day. You glance around. No one's undressed. Of course not. because drying out the costume is easier when you're still wearing it. Your body heat, the only heater you've got, is at least trying to steam the sleeves from the inside. You tie your cloak tighter, water beading along its hem, and shuffle toward the fire pit, which, naturally, is out. The wood's damp. The flint's missing. The entire morning smells like despair and unwashed linen. But hey, at least your costume's still on you. Unlike poor Richard, who yesterday made the fatal error of removing his hose to air them out and discovered 2 hours later that a rat had gnawed clean through the ankle. You hear him grumble as he walks past in a pair of ill-fitting borrowed leggings. Bite me once, shame on you. Bite me twice? I'm staying in costume till I rot. Fair. You sit down on a stool, trying to pretend the steam rising from your arms is dramatic stage ambience and not your shirt attempting to escape your body in vapor form. The door opens. A gust of wind makes everyone flinch. In walks Mistress Brackley, eyes scanning the damp disaster with the expression of someone who knew this would happen and blames all of you anyway. Her eyes narrow at the puddle under the cloak rack. That was the new velvet, she says, flat as a stage plank. No one answers. Because if she's talking to the room, she's not talking to you, and that's how you survive. She storms off to check for damage. You'd feel sorry for the cloak if it hadn't tried to strangle you during your beau last night. Still dripping, still drowsy, still half rehearsing lines in your head, you settle back down. There's no point in removing the costume now. It's damp, yes. Heavy, sure. But once it starts drying on your body, it'll at least mold to your shape like a slightly more dramatic second skin. And besides, you've got 2 shows today. Who has time to redress? You rest your chin on your hand and close your eyes. Steam curls off your shoulders. Rain drums a steady rhythm above. And somewhere in the corner, someone mutters, "Next time I reincarnate, I'm coming back as a hat." Not a bad idea. You're ankle deep in mud by the time the first bell rings. The stagehands are cursing like shipwrecked sailors, your fellow actors are flailing about with soggy scripts, and the pit, the standing room area for the groundlings, is a churning soup of footprints, spilled cider, and crushed goose feathers. And you? You're still in costume. Because of course you are. Mainstream historical fact, Elizabethan stages didn't have the modern luxury of indoor, temperature-controlled theaters. Outdoor venues like the Globe had limited backstage facilities and no true dressing rooms. Most actors arrived already in costume, layered and ready, to avoid the logistical nightmare of changing in cramped, wet, or public spaces. Quick changes happened behind curtains, screens, or even props, and sometimes, they didn't happen at all. You tiptoe through the muck, trying to keep your hem above the splash line. It doesn't work. The lower edge of your robe now resembles a battlefield of browns and greens and something suspiciously sticky. Someone tosses a prop chicken across the stage, misses, and it lands at your feet with a tragic squawk of deflated dignity. You sigh. Just another day in the theater. Fringe tidbit? There's an account of one company performing Macbeth outdoors during a sudden rainstorm. The actors continued despite being soaked, though Lady Macbeth reportedly slipped mid-monologue and launched into a spontaneous, and wildly popular, dance number. It became such a crowd favorite that some companies began rehearsing wet weather variants of their performances. You duck under the back awning, which leaks exactly where you're standing, and peer into the tiring area, a noble name for a patch of boards and a curtain that flaps in the wind like a banner of disappointment. Everyone's crammed in, half-dressed nobles, half-mad jesters, and one very large man in a bear costume who looks like he's questioning all of his life choices. Historians still argue whether actors ever performed entire shows wearing the wrong garments because the right ones were too wet or simply missing. Some suggest audiences were more forgiving in those days, more focused on the words than the wardrobe. Others believe a single wardrobe failure could tank an actor's standing, especially with upper-class patrons. You tug your jerkin straight, even though it's plastered to your back like an ambitious barnacle. Your sleeves are sticking to your arms. Your doublet smells like damp cheese. Your shoes, once gallant, now sludge-colored, make a sloshing sound with every step. And still, you go on. Because the show waits for no one. Not weather. Not discomfort. Not even the bear in the corner now sneezing into his paws. You take your mark behind the curtain, heart beating, breath visible in the cold. A drum roll. The crowd stirs. The curtain jerks open, and you're on. No time to think. No time to itch. No time to mourn the fact that your once crisp collar now droops like a lettuce leaf at a summer banquet. You speak your lines. You project through the fog. You own the moment, even if your socks are plotting a rebellion beneath your boots. By Act 3, the sun makes a rare appearance. Your costume, now partially dried by body heat and adrenaline, clings like it's grateful for the ride. You exit stage left, gasping for air and sweatier than a fishmonger in August. Someone hands you a flask. You sip. It's water. You wish it wasn't. But there's no time to complain. Your next entrance is in 2 scenes. And your costume? Still on. Still functional. Still the only thing separating you from a stage full of scowling faces and one very judgmental falconer in the front row. You wink at the bear as you pass. He groans. Wet again. Drier than yesterday, you offer. Progress. Small victories. You return to your corner, legs aching, cloak steaming gently in the late sun, and collapse against a stack of hay bales. Your costume sags with you, but it's still intact. Still yours. Still ready for Act 4. Because in this world of leaky ceilings, muddy stages, and make-believe, your best armor is the thing you never take off. Not even for sleep. You finally peel off your boots. They make a sound like 2 tired toads sighing their last. You sit on the edge of your pallet, steam rising gently from your woolen sleeves, and survey the wreckage of the day. A shredded playbill, a collapsed candelabra, a wig tangled with breadcrumbs, and your dignity, limping somewhere toward the Thames. It's been a long one. Mainstream historical fact: Elizabethan actors often performed multiple times per week, sometimes even daily, with only minimal rehearsal and rapidly rotating scripts. Companies usually maintained a repertoire of 10 to 20 plays in active rotation, and actors were expected to remember dozens of roles, sometimes switching parts from one day to the next. This grueling schedule left little time for rest, let alone costume maintenance. You reach behind your neck and try to loosen the collar. It resists. You pull again. Still no give. Apparently, your ruff has formed a legal union with your doublet and is refusing separation. So be it. Fringe tidbit? Some actors resorted to urine as a starch softening agent. Don't ask who discovered that, but it helped break down the stiff glues and resins used to shape ornate collars. One performer allegedly stored his ruff in a chamber pot overnight. The result? A floppier, but deeply fragrant, costume piece. You lean against the cool stone wall, trying not to think about what your own ruff might be absorbing from this damp, communal sleeping space. The fire crackles nearby. A few half-dressed performers crowded around it like moths to a lukewarm flame. One is sewing a new hem. Another is carefully plucking straw from his beard. You just sit. Because tonight, even your knees are tired. You ran across that stage 3 times in Act 2 alone, once while pretending to be a ghost, once while pretending not to be a ghost, and once while dodging a thrown chicken. You deserve a break. Historians still argue whether Elizabethan troops prioritized costume authenticity or just cobbled together close enough silhouettes. While portraits and costume inventories suggest some care in historical dress, many agree that budget and speed often won out. Hence the frequent anachronisms: Julius Caesar in a doublet, Cleopatra in Tudor lace, and Danish princes in English ruffs. You smile, remembering today's impromptu prop switch: a Roman goblet replaced with a pewter tankard that said "Best Dad." No one noticed. Or they pretended not to. Because when the show runs this fast, perfection is a luxury, function is everything. And sleeping in costume? That's functional. It means you wake up ready. It means fewer pieces lost, fewer seams torn in a scramble, fewer arguments with Mistress Brackley over who last wore the fox fur-lined cape that now smells like pickled onions. You shift, your hose creaking slightly. Tomorrow's show is much ado, and you're Benedict again. Same boots. Same belt. Same slightly cursed hat that flops to the left no matter what you do. You could take it off. You should. But you don't. Instead, you tug it down over your eyes, just enough to block the firelight, and curl onto your side. Your doublet pinches. Your hose itch. But your lines are memorized, your cues are set, and your costume, wrinkled, battered, mildly damp, is still wrapped around you like a second skin. And tomorrow? You'll wear it again. You'll walk on stage again. You'll bow, strut, fight, fall in love, and monologue with exactly as much breath as your corset allows. Because this life isn't glamorous. But it's yours. And the costume? It stays on. You dream in verse now. Not full iambic pentameter. Your subconscious isn't that disciplined, but in loose rhymes and half rhythms, woven together with stage directions that flicker in and out of focus like torchlight. In your dream, you're racing down a hallway of velvet curtains, your boots echoing onward that warps into waves. Behind you, Mistress Brackley shouts, "Your hem is crooked," and suddenly the floor is made of starch and you're drowning in lace. You wake with a start, and a stitch in your side. Because yes, you slept in your costume. Again. Mainstream historical fact: the physical toll of acting in the Elizabethan era was immense. Actors weren't just delivering lines, they were fencing, tumbling, dancing, and gesturing grandly across slippery stages and uneven floors, all while wearing layers of tight, heavy, restrictive clothing. There are references to actors collapsing offstage, nursing bruises between scenes, and even fainting mid-performance from heat or exhaustion. You sit up slowly, wincing as the familiar stiffness rolls down your spine like a judgmental landlord inspecting late rent. Your jerkin is wrinkled in ways that defy geometry. Your hose are bunched at the knees, and one of your sleeves appears to have wrapped itself into a knot at your elbow. It's not elegant. It's not even passable. But it's all still there. Fringe tidbit? A little-known ritual among some traveling companies involved assigning a costume whisperer, a junior actor or assistant tasked with checking and gently fixing sleep wrinkles and garment distortions in the early morning, all without waking the performer. It's equal parts considerate and unsettling. One diary entry reads, "I awoke with my hem uncrumpled and my collar freshly pinned. I suspect Thomas again." You glance around. No sign of Thomas. Your collar is decidedly not freshly pinned. You groan and tug your belt back into place, narrowly avoiding the dagger hilt that has taken up residence in your lower back like an overly dramatic lumbar support. Outside, the bell tolls again. Another show. Another role. Another day of sweat, mud, and minimal applause. You pull yourself up and stretch, your joints cracking like an overused prop door. Historians still argue whether actors were truly respected professionals or simply tolerated entertainers scraping by in a rough city. Some patrons adored them, showering them with gifts and attention. Others dismissed them as vagrants in velvet. Either way, actors occupied a strange middle world, famous, but not safe, visible, but not protected. You step carefully around the sleeping forms of your fellow performers, each one curled in their own awkward ballet of fabric and fatigue. No one's undressed. Of course they haven't. Even now, even after the worst rain in weeks, the worst audience in memory, and the worst stage fight in history, you're pretty sure at one point you punched yourself, they've all stayed dressed. Why? Because once the performance ends, the job doesn't. You might be called to entertain a passing noble at a moment's notice. You might need to fill in for another actor who's lost his voice screaming at a rat that stole his boot. Or you might just be too tired to wrestle with laces and layers in the pitch dark, knowing you'll only have to put it all back on in a few hours. You pat down your chest, your props are still in place. Your pouch still jingles with 2 coins and a crumb. Your cuffs are crumpled but present. You are, somehow, still stage ready. Barely. You stagger toward the washing basin, splash your face, and let the icy water bring you back to life, or something like it. The girl playing Ophelia today is brushing her wig with a fork. The boy playing Claudius is eating cheese off a prop skull. It's all very normal. And you? You're still in character. Even here. Even now. Because when you sleep in the costume, dream in dialogue, and wake already halfway into Act I, you're never really off stage. The skull-like moths around candlelight, you remember. You wore this for 3 roles, 2 cities, and a dozen standing ovations. You slept in it, bled in it, and once, briefly, used it as a potholder. You never changed it. Because the truth is, this isn't just a costume anymore. It's who you are. And maybe it always has been. The lights are long extinguished now. The crowd's roar faded into the hush of distant footsteps on cobbled streets. The velvet curtains sag gently in the corner, their edges brushed by slow-moving drafts that whisper of past monologues and misthrown props. Somewhere, a rat sniffs at an abandoned bread crust and thinks better of it. And you? You're still lying there. Still in costume. But it doesn't weigh you down anymore. Not like it used to. It's become something softer in the quiet of night, less like armor, more like memory. A memory stitched from too many nights with too little sleep, with laughter, with the warm murmur of 1,000 strangers holding their breath at once. You shift slightly, your shoulder grazing the cool stone wall, the fabric of your doublet rustling like turning pages. No stage now. No spotlight. Just the soft sound of your own breath, the faint thrum of life continuing beyond the playhouse walls. Even your aches are quieter here. The kind of tired that settles deep and warm, not heavy. The kind that lets you sleep without dreams. Because you've already lived so many lives under one roof, in one costume, night after night. And somehow, without ever taking it off, you found yourself. So rest now. Let the curtain fall, just for a while. The world will wait. And your costume? It'll still be here tomorrow. Waiting to be worn. Ready for one more scene. Just like you.